Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and welcome to Genre Bender's Obscurities and Flawed Gems, where we look at the best stuff you've never heard of. On this 4th of July, I've decided to cover 4 films that all have something in common. They all are celebrating anniversaries this year, and they all contain flying saucers. Since America has an anniversary as well, I figured, why not throw it all together for one big special video? Well, don't forget that one of them is more relevant to the 4th than the others. True, but we'll get to that in due time. So sit back and enjoy the journey. It's kind of amazing that even after all this time, even in a post-Star Wars environment, Forbidden Planet still holds up as one of the best space operas ever made. Of course, it's very different from the modern standard. Whereas most modern sci-fi is driven by fast-paced action with high stakes and rapid-fire quips, Forbidden Planet is a real slow burn with dialogue that borders on Shakespearean soliloquizing. And yes, that comparison is very deliberate on my part. It's no secret that this movie was heavily inspired by one of William Shakespeare's later plays, The Tempest, although I would not call it an adaptation or a reimagining. No, inspired is the better term, as the movie has enough differences from the play to make it distinct. For example, Professor Morbius is similar to Prospero in that he lives in an isolated realm with only his daughter for company, and he has mastery over something that, even when explained, appears magical in nature. Yet unlike Prospero, he has no desire to end his isolation, nor does he fully comprehend the incredible power that he wields. Robbie the robot could be compared to Ariel, since both are non-human entities who can work miracles and are happy to serve. Yet where Ariel is mischievous and unknown to the larger cast, Robbie is very proper and his existence is out in the open. The list could go on, but the point is, the influences from The Tempest are just that. Since this video is about movies with flying saucers in them, I suppose I should mention that the ship in this movie, officially called the C-57D Star Cruiser, is unique among the saucers you'll see later. Every saucer henceforth is an alien craft, but this one is flown by humans. Why, you may ask? Well, as UFO sightings increased throughout the 50s, many reports were of disc-shaped objects, clearly different from the oblong aircraft people knew existed. When combined with the theory that these objects were alien vehicles more advanced than our own, this planted the idea in people's minds that saucers were somehow specially suited for intergalactic travel, so when we reached that point, we'd be using similar vehicles. Hence, Forbidden Planet depicts the people of the 23rd century cruising through space in a flying saucer. Actually, if you think about it, these guys are still landing on a world they're not native to, so in a sense, they're still aliens arriving in a flying saucer. You know, funnily enough, you're right. It's both a straightforward depiction of the trope and an inversion of it, and well before the sight became commonplace in movies. Pretty crazy, isn't it? Anyway, at the heart of this movie, we find some really interesting topics raised. The biggest one, of course, is the question of whether it's possible to ever be free of darkness. Morbius states that the Krell, the extinct race who inhabited the planet eons ago, were a truly superior people, so advanced and so intelligent that even a genius like him has barely scratched the surface of what their leftover technology can do. Apparently, the Krell's greatest achievement was a device that could free the mind completely, making materialism and institutionalism things of the past. But the twist is that the Krell, and by extension Morbius, forgot about the subconscious mind, otherwise called the id. They considered the id to be an outdated notion, something they had developed beyond just like everything else, yet their devices unleashed those ids to wreak havoc on their civilization. With no institutions to guide them, no knowledge of the unfortunate side effect of their technology, and no clue at all what they were doing to themselves, the Krell were destroyed by their own minds. A rather interesting point is raised in that regard. The movie is not anti-technology or anti-knowledge. Things like the Star Cruiser, the ancient technology of the Krell, and Robbie are all treated as nothing short of amazing. The shared error of Morbius and the Krell is that they believe themselves so advanced that they are beyond certain archaic concepts. It never dawns on them that those concepts are not only still applicable, but also downright dangerous if they are ignored. Sounds to me like the movie's a cautionary tale calling for balance between progressivism and conservatism. You know, moving forward while preserving the past, because no matter how great technology is, you never know when you might need to revert to the old-fashioned ways. Pretty much, even the last line of the movie says that's the lesson humanity is supposed to take away as it becomes more advanced. There's another curious theme explored in the character of Alta, Morbius's daughter. Now, I'm sure some people might watch this movie, view it with a modern feminist lens, and write off both her character and her treatment as sexist stereotypes that date the movie. Now, sure, some of that is a sign of the times, but I think there's more nuance to her than that. The whole point of Alta's character is that she was born and raised on a planet without any human interaction outside of her father. Her only other companions are Robbie, who is more of a butler than a family member, and the animals who are tame in her presence. We might not have seen her upbringing, but we do see the effect it has on her when other humans finally show up. She's technically human, but for all intents and purposes, Alta may as well be an alien because she understands nothing about human behavior, not even her own. She was raised to be free-spirited and innocent, but that results in her being naive and unintentionally provocative. She really doesn't understand why the men who have come to her home act the way they do, or why her clothes are considered inappropriate, or what her own feelings are for Commander John Adams. Admittedly, the movie doesn't develop this side of things too much, but that doesn't mean Alta is nothing more than a sex object. She is an interesting character, just a slightly underbaked one. Of course, we must also pay respects to the real breakout star of this film, the one and only Robbie the Robot. Despite the posters depicting Robbie in a monstrous manner, he's actually one of those rare friendly robots in the sci-fi landscape. Sure, he's essentially the Morbius family butler, yet he's so endearing. Part of it is the matter-of-fact way he speaks even while performing superhuman tasks, and part of it is how he expresses a little bit of personality beyond mere subservience. What stands out the most are his one-on-one scenes with Alta and the cook, respectively. In Alta's scene, we hear him express some mild annoyance at being asked to make yet another dress, and we learn that he was late in responding to her because he was taking some personal time. That is our one and only hint that Robbie might have more independence than Morbius first implies. In the cook scene, Robbie's analysis of the bourbon comes with him loudly belching, and the cook's dialogue later suggests that Robbie was drinking with him after the bourbon is synthesized. Of course, the robot probably can't get drunk, but this again implies that there's more to Robbie than first meets the eye. It's not overt, of course, but it all went a long way towards getting people to love him. Boy, did they love him. He had a long career beyond Forbidden Planet, showing up in other movies and TV shows right up into the early 2000s. Very true, and the saucer would turn up in the Twilight Zone. Clearly, Forbidden Planet left its mark in the world, as did another movie released a few months later in that same year. I think at this point it's safe to say that Earth vs. the Flying Saucers is the most iconic UFO movie of all time. Everything about this movie can be described with the word iconic, especially the flying saucers themselves. Even though it's not the only alien invasion movie to come out of the 50s, indeed it wasn't even the first of its kind, it stands out as different from the rest. This can partially be explained by how the movie was originally envisioned as being informational rather than fictional. Yes, this movie was first envisioned as a kind of docudrama exploring UFO sightings, which were still a new phenomenon at the time. This meant that a lot of research was done during pre-production, including interviews with eyewitnesses. Somewhere along the way, it was decided to make a fictional invasion movie instead, but that commitment to authenticity remained in place. That research clearly went into how the saucers themselves are depicted. Let's not forget that this movie is very different from the rest of Ray Harryhausen's work. Harryhausen is best known for his stop-motion creatures, particularly of the mythological and prehistoric varieties. But those are creatures with limbs and faces, which allow for different ways to be expressive. The saucers are vehicles with very streamlined designs, and you would think that would inhibit Harryhausen's ability to make them expressive. But God bless him, he found a way.
The animation is subtle, but just through simple tilts and wobbles, he imbued these discs with genuine personalities.
Now, being mechanical vehicles, they're not as expressive as, say, the Cyclops or the Emir, but they're not supposed to be.
The saucers are neither sympathetic nor misunderstood. They are extensions of the cold-hearted collectivist invaders, so a simpler characterization makes sense. This is a significant factor in why they remain so iconic to this very day.
That, and they look a heck of a lot better than hanging a pie tin from a fishing line. Yeah, that too.
One major element this movie helped solidify was the possibility that mankind could fight back against the invaders. Remember, up to this point, the gold standard for alien invasion stories was War of the Worlds, in which the human race is utterly helpless against the Martian armada, and it is only through a miracle of nature that they are defeated. Prior to that, they were unstoppable, and the human civilization crumbles in blind panic as a result.
As the 50s rolled along, we saw more stories in which mankind was able to fight back against the aliens. We may be the underdogs, but we're never truly helpless because our ingenuity will always save the day.
Earth vs. the Flying Saucers was one such example that really helped cement this trope in the genre, and it results in one heck of an intense finale, too.
Of course, that ingenuity stuff might have had a little something to do with the Cold War. I don't think it's any coincidence that the human heroes are all Americans and the aliens are a homogenized collective meant to be evocative of communism, meaning this allegorically is about beating the Soviet Union. No, that's definitely not a coincidence.
It's also probably not a coincidence that the new weaponry mankind implements in this movie would be emulated almost a decade later in a well-known Godzilla movie, albeit with some new elements added. That's beside the point, though. The real point is that Earth vs. the Flying Saucers remains iconic for a reason, and we will see its influence later on.
Before that, though, we must follow suit with my headgear and get patriotic. It is Independence Day, after all. There was a trend back in the 90s of putting contemporary spins on classic entertainment. Hollow Man was a reinvention of The Invisible Man, Tiny Toon Adventures was a reinvention of Looney Tunes, and Independence Day was a reinvention of War of the Worlds.
That should be obvious, right? The aliens descend without warning, they strike and pretty much curb stomp mankind, there's a failed attempt to nuke them as per the 1953 War of the Worlds, and they're ultimately defeated by a virus, only in this case it's of the computer variety. However, much like with Forbidden Planet and The Tempest before, Independence Day is better described as being inspired by War of the Worlds rather than just copying it.
It can also be described as divisive, at least for the generation who first experienced it.
At the time, Independence Day was a love-it-or-hate-it kind of movie, and the lines were drawn quite clearly. The general public seemed to love it, which is how it became a box office hit, but critics and self-proclaimed intellectuals seemed to hate it and its popularity. The biggest criticism from its detractors ultimately comes down to it being too big on spectacle without any substance.
Speaking personally, I like the movie, and I say that even knowing what Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin would do next. Watching it every 4th of July has been a tradition for me and my family since 1996, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that regard.
I mean, yes, the movie is very heavy on spectacle, but so what? This is some darn good spectacle, and most of it was done in camera. Digital techniques were used to put everything together, but you are otherwise looking at real things here. These are real model cities, real miniature ships, real explosions, and real alien puppets on real sets.
This was one of the last strongholds for practical effects in a landscape becoming dominated by CGI. Ironic, given how Emmerich and Devlin would have their reputations tarnished by applying CGI to Godzilla just 2 years later. And even that movie has more practical effects than most people realize, but that's beside the point. The end result is that from a visual perspective, Independence Day has aged really well. Heck, it even looks better than its sequel.
Not only that, but the movie is not truly devoid of substance, since we have multiple interesting character arcs. We have a leader who finds his place leading the troops into battle. We have a genius who goes from wasting his talents to realizing his full potential. We have a pilot realizing his dream while also learning what his true priorities are. We have a father embracing a faith he thought he had lost. And we have another father struggling to do something right with his life after years of being a screw-up. There's actually a lot stuffed in here. Is it deep and angsty? No, but it doesn't need to be. The different arcs all intersect and balance each other out in such a way that they work despite being fairly straightforward.
Some of that substance exists within the extended cut, which I recommend even more than the theatrical version. But whatever version you watch, it's really appropriate for this time of year. The next movie, however, you can watch anytime if you're in the right mood. Back in the early 1990s, Tim Burton was in talks with Topps to make a movie based on their darkly comedic, ultra-violent trading card storyline entitled Dinosaurs Attack. But then Steven Spielberg released Jurassic Park, and Burton abandoned the idea, figuring that that movie was so good there was no possible way to top it, and dinosaur movies would pretty much be dead from that point onward. Given how long it's taken for the Jurassic movies to get any sort of competition, I'd say his prediction was spot on. Yeah, it was indeed. So Dinosaurs Attack was scrapped, and Burton and Topps pivoted to a similar but different title, Mars Attacks.
This has gone down in history as one of the most insane alien invasion movies ever made, largely thanks to its black-as-tar sense of humor. Sure, it's toned down from the gruesomeness of the cards, but the movie still pushes the limits of good taste most of the time.
A large part of that stems from the Martians themselves, specifically with their motivation, or rather, lack thereof.
In other alien invasion movies, the aliens invade for a reason. Most of the time it's because the aliens' world is dying, usually through their own doing, and they need a new place to live. In Mars Attacks, on the other hand, the aliens appear to be invading purely for the sake of messing with humanity. They don't have to invade, they want to invade. This is nothing but fun and games for them. Our destruction is their entertainment, and they take perverse glee in every act. That alone might make them the evilest alien invaders of all time, because at least the others have understandable reasons.
That sheer insanity is only enhanced by how Mars Attacks harkens back to Earth versus the flying saucers, which we discussed earlier.
You've no doubt noticed that the Martian saucers are nearly identical to the Harryhausen saucers, and a sadistically hilarious spin on the Washington Monument sequence is even featured. This is because Burton is as much a fanboy as he is a filmmaker, and Ray Harryhausen was a big influence on him. This shines through in all of Burton's stop-motion movies, and it's on full display here as well. I might even recommend watching them back-to-back for a weekend marathon.
Sadly, despite Burton's growing status at the time, and despite having a larger cast of celebrities than most Oscar winners, Mars Attacks flopped back in 1996.
Why? Well, the biggest criticism at the time was that people thought the humor was too dark. Now, yes, it's very dark, jet black at times, but that's the point.
Sure, dark comedy is an acquired taste, but what did you expect from a guy like Tim Burton? He makes dark movies, that's his thing.
If I were to rationalize this critique at all, it's probably because Independence Day was released first, and it was so uplifting and sincere that people just weren't ready for a cynical entry in the same genre so soon. Ergo, Mars Attacks simply showed up at the wrong time, and people wrote it off as having not read the room.
Well, the good news is that Mars Attacks has aged well. These days it's considered a cult classic. Indeed, a cult classic that's often counted among the other classics we've discussed here.
In a way, it's fitting that Mars Attacks should be the last movie we discuss, since it brings us full circle. Despite being a global phenomenon, the term flying saucer originated in America, so the phenomenon has a unique tie to America. These 4 movies speak to that American fascination, showing how it not only lasted, but evolved over time.
Whatever the real truth about UFOs ends up being, it won't change the status of these classics. They'll remain in our zeitgeist for a long time to come. So be sure to watch the sky on this 4th of July. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Now, if you'll excuse me, a new batch of grainy black and white videos and photos have just been released, and they're not gonna analyze themselves.